the things that excited me like the most about talking with you today, though, is like you're such a wonderful person, and you literally are one of those people that embodies like the notion of doing things for others, you know, and you look so fulfilled and so happy as a result.
Hmm.
I know some people that are like it's all about their alignment and their spiritual alignment with what they do and all that, but it's like it's not for other people. It's their artistic vision or drive. With you, it's always like this, like you do so much for other people, and so like when I saw like a bunch of your interviews that you've done or that other people have done of you, I was like, we never talk about you. I want to talk about you. Is it weird if we talk about you? This is my one question.
Oh, that's so fun. I'm excited. Well, I like to talk about me, so I'll take that. And I'll tell you that I do, what does drive me certainly is the impact that can help other people make. And that's my driver at the end of the day. And I love being able to have that opportunity to do it. So you're spot on when you say that that's something that really lights me up. It does.
Yeah, and like you live it. Like it's so clear. Just like anyone who's around you just knows. Like, and again, you've empowered and helped so many people. We work with a lot of the same people, and they're always like, "Oh my God, Cami helped me like cross this threshold," or "Cami really helped me align myself with my message and put it out there and monetize." Is a big one that I hear from people. Like, Cami really helped me articulate it in a empowering way that it's not salesy and gross, you know. But
Right.
was that always the drive? We've never really talked about. Like I'm excited to like learn about you because like I've had the pleasure of working with you too, and you're brilliant. But like, was this always a drive for you? Like when you
No,
first started your career? No.
no. I started my career pretty young. I had a young son to take care of, and I knew that I needed to put food on the table. And I mean, that was my driver at that point, right? It was like making sure my son had food. And I know you can relate to that. You've got a daughter, right? I mean, and so when we had these little beings that we're taking care of, that certainly drives what we do and how we show up in the world. And I put myself through school when he was a small boy, and as I got out of college and stepped into my career, I was very much about, okay, I want this corporate job. This is where I'm going. And I was very specific about, I had this desire to climb the ladder in the corporate world, which I did. And I had I had a good time and a lot of fun with that. And there was nothing that was about that was it's altruistic kind of approach, right? It wasn't about the giving back to others. And I did that for 20 plus years. And, I loved being a team leader, and I loved having my team, or I had a team around the world that I was leading, which was super, super cool. I loved the international aspects of my old job. And and I was helping people in their roles on my teams, right? I mean, so I was helping people in that way, but and it wasn't at that time that I could actually identify that was what I loved about my job then, was helping others grow in their careers. I hadn't connected those dots early on.
What role were you, like? What were you doing? Were you in marketing or?
Yeah, I was a VP of marketing. So, and I mean, at one point I literally had 90 people that were part of my organization. Not all direct reports, obviously, but there was 90 marketers in our company around the world that I was responsible for leading and helping grow. And so I love that. I love that aspect of helping them. And when I got laid off in 2008, it was like the rug got pulled out from underneath of my feet. And I was like, what the heck am I meant to be doing now? Because I actually thought I would always go back to the corporate world. And it just kept being very clear that wasn't going to be the route. And when I started doing my own inner work, that deep work, that who am I? What am I meant to do with my life? What's my purpose? All those kinds of questions. It started to dawn on me that it wasn't about me being the leader in that space. It was really very much about enabling the people. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's a connection here. And that was kind of where the ideas started to get planted around me moving into my own business and helping other people. And that's how that kind of all unfolded.
Wait, so that's what I love. Like, if we're doing, and P.S. This is something I'd love to do down the road. If I was shooting the origin tale movie of
Hmm.
Cami Guildner, like I feel like that'd be the great place to start. Is like okay, like we, it's like, imagine like a shot of like your office and you see like awards and all these team meetings and all the people who report to you, people running at you, and then all of a sudden you get fired, you get let go,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
what downside, whatever the situation. 2008, clearly a
Yeah,
lot going
it
on.
was downsides, yeah. Well, it
Downsizing, right?
wasn't a downsize, it was a change. It was I got laid off, but it was definitely a change. It wasn't a downsize in the role, but it was definitely okay, we're going in a different direction and your role's not going to be part of that. So, yeah.
That sounds like that sounds even more hurtful. Like,
Oh, it was.
oh my
What's the
god.
word they use? A reduction in force, right? So there's the reduction in force. I was part of a riff, and I was like, that is like the you pull out the humanization of what corporations do when they're maneuvering through something like that, a riff.
It's a whole other language, right? Like it's a
Totally,
completely different.
totally.
So in accordance with language, you have to now learn a whole new language. So was it? So this is where I wanted to. We'll do flashbacks. Growing up, because like again, like to me, you're like such a hero, and I'm not saying that to be cute. Like this is just how it is. I see
Mm.
you as like such a larger than life presence and power. Like you're one like in my head, like I always tell you, like
You're good for the ego.
but like in my mind, you're like a popular kid, like
Mm.
obviously, like in the female entrepreneur community, like you're a popular kid, like you've created an amazing world, an amazing community. With was that so in that moment you have to learn a whole new language, right? You're
Mm.
stuck. You can either try to like go back and or go aside to another corporation or learn a whole new language of what is it that I want, and like you talk about the R's, right? Like the
Right.
like how to really be in alignment with your spirituality, how to be visible, how to find your voice. Was that all something that was ingrained in you earlier in life, or like no, not at
No,
all?
not at all.
But
In fact,
like,
that was
yeah,
it. You know what was ingrained in me early in my life was nature and what nature does for me. So my spiritual connection was through nature growing up. And when I left the corporate world, I realized how disconnected from nature I was. I wasn't doing as much in nature as was core to my being. There was something that was misaligned. In fact, my dad passed away about a month after I got laid off, and that when I paused to think about what my dad had taught me, that was one of the really big important things for me, was how much nature was just an intricate part of my being. And I felt really disconnected from that. I mean, I would definitely I did some big trips when I was in the corporate world. I mean, I would go to Tibet, or I did some really amazing trips to Patagonia, those sorts of things when I was in the corporate world. But they were like little plug-in pieces, right? It's like I'd go in, I'd do that for a couple weeks, and then I'd come back and I'd be all entrenched for another, 9, 10 months before I'd do another big plug-in somewhere. And so it wasn't an intricate part of I wasn't taking time for nature. And so nature was definitely a piece that had always been there for me. And when my dad died and I kind of started to read, and I took about 17 months from the time I got laid off to the time I actually figured out what I was going to do. And there was this time. I mean, I had that space where I could go out and watch baby birds be born in the barn, right? And learn to fly, kind of thing. And it was like, I was just entrenched with it. I'd go out there and just sit for an hour and watch the babies learn to fly. And I dropped deep down into this place that I had forgotten. And that was where that inner fire started to light back up inside of me again. And the layers started to come away. I mean, because you do have layers when you're in the corporate world. I mean, I definitely had all kinds of layers of armory and walls, and all of that kind of started to come down.
survival techniques, right? Like,
Totally, totally. And when that started to come down, I reconnected back to me, and that was where that awareness really came into to being back into me again.
that's a beautiful way of explaining that, because I would say that's like almost the number one thing. I'm trying to figure out what I'm obsessed with, as a storyteller, as a host, as all these things, as a director, and it's like I think it keeps coming back to how people figure out what they want to do. something I
Yes.
hear a lot from clients is, and for myself that I went through for years is this compare and shame, where it's like, well, that person started when they were 22 and they made 30 under 30 and millionaires and they came up with it, and I think that like that person had maybe a clear vision of what they wanted or whatever. Maybe it came earlier. I don't know what, but for a lot of us, as we kind of grow older and have experiences
Hmm.
and have kids and have relationships and some of those relationships succeed or fail, like it is astounding to me. I'm obsessed with how people figure out at various stages what it is that they want in life. And I loved how you said it, where you were like I could almost see this vision of you just sitting in the barn going, "Well, fuck, I don't have anything else to do right now. I'm just gonna go. Like, what am I gravitating towards? You know?"
Right. And I think that's when you pause like that, what happens is you can actually hear the messages that you're meant to hear, that inner wisdom that's inside. And and just to, hit on what you just said, it's like we're all on this journey, and I can go back to everything that happened over the course of my lifetime, from the time having my son when I was 20 years old, to going to school at nights, to taking the jobs that I took. All of them shaped me into who I am today. And so I can look at back over the course of my life, even when I met my husband, I was in my late 40s when I met my husband. And so I had all this growth that I had to do prior to meeting him. And then it was the right time to meet him. And in fact, we'd gone to college, in the same college at the same time, but we didn't cross each other's path. And so it's like all these things happen, trusting all things happen for us in the exact right time in our journey that we're on in this earth. I'm a big believer that we're all born into this time for a reason, and we've got a purpose, and all the life experiences leading up to now are right in alignment with where we're meant to be going.
Well, okay. Oh my God. Okay, this is great. So especially I love hearing that story, especially that you're saying you're in your late 40s. I know a lot of people that same thing. They met their second husband or second
Mm-hmm.
partner, in
Yep.
their late 40s, and they are happier than ever. It's like such a
Totally.
better fit.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, and if we would have met and, when we were back in college together, it probably wouldn't have worked all the same way, right? It just wouldn't have been, we weren't ready for each other. When we did meet each other, we were just so ready for each other. And it's so easy. So, such an easy relationship. I feel really blessed that, we've been together, I think now, I think 13 years or something. So, yeah.
And you guys look so happy. Like when I see you guys, like whenever
Yeah.
we're shooting
Yeah.
something and
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh, you guys look so good together.
And I'm doing the math. So that means we met actually in our mid 30s or mid 40s, not late 40s.
I would have said early 20s, but okay, I get it. I get it.
Okay. Don't want to add on extra years. So,
So but this brings up kind of something that and I want to get back to the idea of like how to really articulate for the people that you work with, like how you help them articulate what they want. But you are also a master attractor, right? Attraction is a big thing you talk about in business. How to attract the right
yes.
client, how to attract the pay that you believe, your
Yes.
value and all these things. Um, so but first is want, right? So how do you help people cross that threshold or really like embrace that you talk about spiritual alignment with yourself, with your message,
Right.
with your business. What have you seen standing in the way of people doing that, and then how do you help them get through
Yeah.
that yourself?
And the reason I'm so passionate about this is because I've been my own journey, right? So I came out of the corporate world with a very linear way of thinking about business and marketing and all of those sorts of things. And it wasn't until I journeyed my own journey that I really realized that the richness of what happens is when we really get deep into our purpose, when we are really in that attracting or resonating on a high vibration, right? Our energetically, we are resonating on a high vibration. And we can have all the right marketing and all the right pricing and packaging in place and be getting out and being visible. And if you're not taking care of how you resonate, that energy of who you are, what happens is that we're not stepping into our full potential. And so I felt that journey myself. It's like my company was really growing. And then I started to follow a lot of shiny stars out there. And I changed up my marketing in a way that was very formulaic. It was very pain based, like your marketing is all on pain and scarcity. You've heard that message. And I'm like, that's not the way to do good marketing. The way to do good marketing is to be elevating your people, helping them see more potential in their lives than what, they might see for themselves. And that's expansive, right? So when you start stepping into that expansive space of what's possible, that's where you start to attract more energy into your life, right? So money is energy. And so how do we step into that space of really letting that energy of money flow through us, to us, and out, so it's an evolution. And that's where, when we are in that really grounded space of knowing what it is that we're meant to be doing in the world, how we're meant to be doing it, how we're meant to serve, and taking care of our own energy, of how we resonate energetically. That's where that's where you get the huge growth opportunities come through to you.
See, okay, yes. This is great. Perfect. See, this is what keeps coming up for me is when I hit kind of rock bottom, and so many of my clients talk about this notion of rock bottom. It's different for everyone.
Yeah.
But this was my then wife and I. We were we had a new child. We'd moved here from Chicago. We moved to Colorado from Chicago. We kind of lost everything. We had a business in Chicago. We didn't transfer it effectively here. We didn't know anyone here. We came with no network. It started from scratch. It was painful. And I remember sitting like 2 or 3 years into this misery that we just started learning about mindset and how to shift it and all that. So it was still new. It was a new practice and it didn't come natural. It didn't come easy. And I remember sitting there going in the thick of it when I didn't have more than like $10 in my bank account. It was awful. I remember just going, I just want to perform. I just want to do shows. And in that moment, shows looked a little different than they do now. Now I literally do shows all day with clients. Like I am doing shows every 2 hours, Yeah. But my vision then really felt like it came from fear. It came from my own fear and my own like, oh, well, I know that when I've performed my show in the past, like I've enjoyed myself, I've had a good time. I wasn't conscious in that moment of, is it like sustainable for me to do 8 shows a week of my comedy show? Is there a market for it? Is there an audience? I didn't think in those terms. I was like, I just want to do this thing out of fear.
And you loved it, right?
I love performing a lot.
Yeah.
What I'm doing today, my business has actually evolved. I'm actually directing a lot of incredible women's podcasts. Right. And coaching them, and so like literally the medium of doing it on Zoom and virtual and all these things kind of like added to a perfect storm of me really finding the artistic medium that I'm most fulfilled by. Like the topics are the more interesting to me. But in that moment, this 3-4 years ago, there was no COVID. People didn't run to Zoom all day, so it's like it was fun for me, but it wasn't as fun as the thing I tapped into.
Right, and that's part of the journey, right? I think what you're describing there is you started to experience something that you enjoyed. And if you look at the law of attraction, what is it called? Emotional vibration scale. Have you seen that? So at the very bottom of the emotional vibration scale are things like, dread or fear or judgment, all the, kind of low energy, low vibe emotions. And at the top of that are joy and passion and happiness and, all these other things. So there's this whole spectrum. And when you stepped into doing those shows, you're tapping into high vibe energy. And I think that starts to shift us into a new way of being. And then what you discover is it's like, this is an iterative process, right? It's like, we never just get there. It's like you started to step into that space and it evolved into, oh my gosh, I love this aspect of it. Where do I take it next? And then it keeps evolving and growing. And that's a really expansive way to look at growth, is by tapping into those high vibration emotions of joy and passion, and like you were doing there, you open the door to other things that your business continues. And it's like all of our business continue to evolve.
That was a great way of saying it. I had to say, well done. That I feel like in many ways that's the answer I've been looking for years. Is because I've heard bits and pieces of, like this idea of, well, just go out and do it, but that feels diminutive, like diminishing,
Uh-huh.
like where it's like, well, just go do it and figure it out, And I used to say
Right.
that, just go try something. Well, but after, if you failed enough in life, like there comes a certain point where you're like, I don't know that I have another try in me. You get,
Yeah.
especially
And
that's
it's looking at failures not as a failure, but actually the growth piece, right? It's like, yeah, what did I learn out of that? There's no such thing as a failure, but really looking at it as okay, that took me down a pathway and it's asking me to shift a little bit to the right or to the left. And then it's that iterative process that I was mentioning.
100%, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, like nowadays, I look at everything as like I remember thinking that first week of Corona. I think I've talked about this on the show, where it's like the first 2 weeks, I was like, "All right, tough guy, this is happening for you. How do you like? Do you want to just chuck everything you've built, or do you want to embrace your philosophies of positive mindset and that this is good? And how do you want to shift it? And then I know like you've had so many clients and women that you've worked with that had incredible years last year in 2020
Yes.
because they did that shift where they go, how is this a gift, right?
And it's interesting because I've been
Yeah.
talking about what I call R factor, how we resonate, for a couple of years. Last year was the year that we really put that into action in my community. And I was super excited about the results of it. I mean, I was just so proud of everyone. And I think the growth that occurred in this past year with my clients I was just like, wow. I was telling them, I told a lot of my women, I didn't grow my business as fast as you grew your business in this year. So there was something about adding that how we resonate the R factor into the work that I was already doing then with the branding and the vision of what you want your business to be and the visibility part of your business. Adding that R factor in shifted everything. And it did for me too. When I had shipped, when I did that myself for my business grew like crazy. It was really exponential what occurred.
What was it? What like on your end in your journey? Because I should say too, did marketing when you were in college? You're like, oh,
Uh-huh.
marketing makes sense. Like marketing makes sense. The more I know you, I'm like, of course you're in marketing, But
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
how did you know? Just bringing it back, like, how did you know at that point that marketing was the way to go?
Yeah. I was drawn to marketing in college. I just thought it was a fun space. I was working in a company where I was getting exposure to marketing. So I was liking that, what it stood for very early on. And, I certainly got a very, after 20 years in the corporate world, I got a very, strategic marketing. I know how to do strategic marketing. I know all the aspects of it. And today I love to talk about, let's break all the rules of marketing. Let's not follow all the rules that are out there that have been set. And, it's like one of them is like, there's no such thing as competition. As a former head of marketing, I would have told you were crazy that I'd say that. But when you truly own your brand for who you are, then no one can have a brand just like you. So there is no such thing as competition. It's really you owning who you are and going out and doing the work that you're meant to do. And then you're in this very unique space.
And then you can attract more of those
Right.
like-minded people that you talk about.
Right. And I think that's, you hit on this early on in this interview, is that the people that I attract into my community, I am blown away by the people that are in my circle of women. And the reason I'm blown away by them is because they're superstars, right? They're total superstars. And I'm like, this is so cool. And then they meet each other and they start connecting and they start growing. And then we get extraordinary men just like you coming into our community, like Brian Kramer coming into our community. And it's just so powerful what happens when you open up that space of just connecting great people to great people.
100%. I want to. There's so much to talk about. I'm like, I want to talk about how that came about. So, in 2008, then I'm bringing it back. You're in it. You're sitting in the barn. You're looking at the birds. And then, at what point did that high vibration come back to you? That first inkling of high vibration, did it come back to you where you're like, you know what? I still do care about marketing, and I want to break the rules. Because there's no like. or maybe was there a way that all the things that the philosophies that you integrate now, that were they there in
Yeah,
2008?
no, they weren't there then. It was very early on in my business. So it took me 17 months before I figured out what I was going to do. And it was the breath of a horse day. I'm like, I'm trying to figure out what the heck I'm supposed to be doing in my life. I'm not working. I have applied for some jobs and interviewed for some jobs, but I don't want those jobs. And I'm on the phone with a coach saying, what the hell am I meant to be doing? I don't know what I'm supposed to do with my life right now. And she said, why don't you go out and breathe your horse's breath today? I was like, okay. So it snowed like 18 inches of snow that day. I put my snow boots on. I trudge out through the Colorado snow out to the barn, and there's my mare, Sugary, standing at the gate, and started to breathe in with her. And then I turned around, put my head back to her back. And it was just like, I had been doing all this work. I'd been doing all this inner work, and suddenly all those pieces just fit together for me. So I saw in that moment that I was not supposed to go back to the corporate world. It was like, I was so clear. I just knew that it was a different pathway. So that took me down, the whole pathway. Okay, what is my business going to be? It was actually the equine guided coaching that took me that route. So I ended up in Northern California about a month later, and spent a month in Northern California with one of the pioneers in the world of equine guided coaching. Learned from her, came back, started my business. And then it was very much about helping women figure out their next chapter in their work. So it was I was working with a lot of corporate women who were hearing a calling for something more, because this was the journey I just come down, right? And they were all going, God, I want some of that. Whatever she's drinking, I want some of that. And so that was where it really started. And then what happened was all of my women, all my clients were like, I don't want to work in the corporate world anymore. I want to be an entrepreneur. And they were taking the leap. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so equipped to help them. And so that's where that shift took place. And that, my work it's like my work continues to evolve even today. It's like the evolution of what we teach, of what is so in alignment with what we've learned ourselves, the journeys we've taken, and how we can help others. Really, we have to live through the trenches of it in order to really be able to serve in that way.
Well, as you're saying that, like I'm thinking, I have this perception, and I'm back on the market now, dating wise.
Uh-huh.
The flag is in the front
You're saying, here I am.
Here it is.
He's a good man, ladies.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Cami. Thank you. I'm trying to get a review, like a Yelp review from my ex-wife. And she's like, yeah, maybe, I don't know. I have this. I'm working through with my coach right now this idea of attractiveness, and again, I've attracted incredible women in my business, and I still catch myself having really old, really negative mindsets in my own value, thinking of myself as valuable in the husband or boyfriend department. But you just helped me kind of realize like that attraction, putting yourself out there to attract others, is an incredible feat of bravery. Like there's an incredible brave process, right? So you're going through all this development. That was bravery to put yourself out there and say, I'm going to start attracting clients.
Totally. And the interesting thing, even in the corporate world, I was very much behind the scenes. I taught people how to I did speaker training in the corporate world. I did PR training in the corporate world. I put other people out into the forefront, and I stood behind, right? And when I started my business, I was like, well, I'll attract people in my community that I know, which I did. I was able to put people in. But when you want to start really growing, then you need to start getting more visible. You need to get on stages. You need to get on podcasts. You need to be out in the world. And that visibility is so scary. And I mean, whether, as you are in the dating space, or whether, an entrepreneurial space, you're putting yourself out there, and it does take courage. And one of the things I love to tell my clients is just get uncomfortable with the sensation of uncomfortable. So get comfortable with the sensation of uncomfortable, because as an entrepreneur, you're going to be uncomfortable a lot, just like in the dating world, right? You're going to put yourself out there and it's going to be uncomfortable. But the more you do it, the more you're stretching into it, and it feels easier each time you're doing it. And so it's that that cycle of stretching and stepping into it.
It's so funny that you talk about uncomfortable. I'm thinking now, like, as an entrepreneur, I'm like, something that I feared and know that a lot of entrepreneurs that are just starting off in their first year or two, there's this fear of rejection, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's discomfort around, I'm going to put myself full time in a field, in an industry, in a position as an entrepreneur where I'm going to be rejected all the time. And I don't remember the last time I was rejected by someone professionally. Like in business, I don't remember in my business, I don't remember the last time I was rejected by someone that I wanted to work with. If I
Uh-huh.
wanted to work with them, they were like, and if they wanted to work with me, then it was, it was a perfect hybrid. So it's like, what are some of the discomforts that you've seen? Is it having to do with women not finding their voice, vision, or the
Yeah.
visibility piece, or I think it's a lot of voice
So
stuff,
it's
right?
it's that I think the visibility piece. When I mean, sometimes people love to get on the stage and they love that, and I mean, and I wasn't one of those people. I was terrified of it. I was totally terrified of to get on the stage, and I've seen some clients have that, and some clients do not. Another place that can be really uncomfortable that I see with entrepreneurs is the whole money story, whatever their money story is, right? And they're like, "Gosh, how can I charge that much?" And it's like helping them find their value to really own who they are and how they make an impact. What's the difference they're going to make for their clients? How's it going to change their life? And because if you don't really look at your relationship with money, you get into a tight cycle, and then it's always a it's like if you don't stretch into that and start to own it and really change that and transform that, then you get in a place where you're always in this lack space, and that's where no one wants to be there.
And then it's hard to have any visibility when you're in a lack space and
Right.
vision, right? There's no
Yeah, and that's
vision.
where you get the whole plane of the mindset is struggling. So that's why when I talk about R factor, I'll talk about this here in a moment, but it's when our mindset is struggling with something, let's say money, we shrink, we play smaller instead of stepping out and being expansive. I mean, the same thing with the stage, right? We shrink, or do we step up and be expansive? And the universe can tell when we're pulling back. The universe goes, "Oop, they've pulled back, and we're going to pull back what we're going to flow to them." And so when I talk about R factor, there's 4 parts to it. There's our mindset. So taking care of our mindset, making sure it's clean, making sure that we're feeding our mind with positive things and helping our mind stay in the positive stories. The second part of that is our body, how we show up in our body, how we resonate in our body, the energies, it could be that how are we taking care of our body from a physical or from a nourishment perspective, from an energetic perspective. The third part of that is spirit, and that's spirit however you spirit. And that means that when we're spiriting, we're really in alignment to our purpose. We're in alignment to how we're meant to make a difference. And then the fourth part of our factor is our community. And that means being in community that uplifts you. If you're in a community that's making you feel smaller, you might want to take a look at it and say, am I playing smaller here for a reason? Or is it just the wrong community for me? Are we uplifting each other? So those are the 4 parts of our factor, how we resonate, that if we can take care of those elements, we become much more expansive in how we show up, and it helps us move through those.
I love that because, like, I think I know again, I've met a lot of women over the years where they were in their first or second year of business, and I remember one client fully said to me, "Well, it's easy for you." This was like a few months ago. "It's easy for you because, like, I don't know anyone. Everybody knows you." And I'm like, "That wasn't the case 5 minutes ago." But I tapped into literally all the things that you've talked about in the R factor, and the biggest part of that was community. Right?
Yeah,
Once you do all that work, then you can show up in a community, and once you're in a community, that's the difference, right? That's making
it
it.
is. I mean, community has been what's made my business go around, for more than a decade. And it's what makes my business grow, and it's the future of my business. When I look at Extraordinary Women Connect, it's a growing community of these changemaker influential women. And I go, and it's growing right now really fast. I mean, there's a lot of growth happening in that community in a year of COVID, right? On top of everything. And so the more we can stop and pause and nourish our communities, nourish our relationships, and you do this so beautifully, Ron, that it's what expands. It's what creates expansion for us.
It is exactly like that's a realization for me too. Is like as we're talking about this notion of community, it is expansion, and it's. And thank you for saying that. Like I love this community. I love being part of this community. My co-parent has started immersing herself in this community the past few months, and it's just it's I love watching it through her eyes now, because she's been on a journey for so long to find her own community, and now that she's part of this world, she's part of like Rachel Chansey's group, The Real Impact, and it's like you see like the ripple effect, and to me I'm like, that's making it. I had this perception, and again in that moment, I think it was 2017, 2018. It was 2017. I'm in this moment, and I was saying to her at the time, I was like, I just want to perform. And to me, I didn't realize what I was really saying at that time. And to me, I was like, I just want to arrive at a community that supports me, gets me, that shows up for me, and I show up for, and I in turn give of myself and all these things. And like, you're right. Again, it's like, I think a lot of people have that perception of when I make it, but what's on the other side of that is I will be in a community. I will be in a community of supportive energy back and forth. So sorry, you want to say something? Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's.
This is like a long setup, but for you, like, when was there the conscious choice then? The next stage, you're like, okay, I'm going to start opening up a community. So first, it was obviously finding your voice, finding your rhythm. When did you kind of go, I have enough clients, not enough, but like I'm working with amazing clients, I want to start creating a community? Was that something that you were?
It's so funny because so this was probably 8 years ago, I'm guessing, if I sat down and did the math. And I remember being in my coach's office and saying to her, we were actually meeting face to face, and I said, I keep introducing this great woman to another great woman. I keep making these connections, and I'm wondering, could I create community with this? And she's like, well, tell me more. What would that look like? I'm like, well, I could envision hosting some events and bringing great women together with great women, making it a space for them to connect, to support one another, to uplift one another. And she says, well, what is stopping you? I'm like, well, what if nobody comes? So, right, there's that little monkey on your shoulder saying, well, what if nobody comes? And she looked at me, she says, would you just go start it already? And so I did. And, that's where that took place. It was like, she just looked at me like, why aren't you starting this? And it was such a comfortable place for me to start that, because again, you go back to me being fearful of being on stages. And it was a way for me to get on stages and really be in a place of service. And then it was about that same time that I started taking a lot of speaker training and realizing it had nothing to do with me. It had everything to do about the other people in the room. And I was like, oh, well, I like that. Now I love stages. But, so it was one of those little catalyst points that got me in front of people in a bigger way. And it took courage. It took me getting over my what if nobody else comes? What if nobody comes? To, okay, this is a really good thing. And that community has been amazing and growing ever since.
It really has. And again, there's so many incredible people that I've had the pleasure of like working with or just meeting, from your community, and the ripple effect is amazing. It still does blow my mind though. Like I really, in theory, the whole podcast should be, I love origin tales, but like the whole podcast or video cast that I do, it should really be about transformation on stage. But like, it does blow my mind that there was a time where you weren't about being on stage, because now it's like I look, just looking at your YouTube page this morning, I was like, you're doing the Soul Speaks, you're doing the Ignite, you're doing so many incredible things, and you're just like, you look at home. I
am at home, which is funny, right? And it's like, I just really had to get over myself and say, just like my coach kicked me out the door, just go do it. And that was kind of the evolution that took place. And that, finally was like, okay, wait a minute. I actually really love stages, and I love being able to do speaking in a very authentic way. I don't position myself to be the master, you know, the master of all speakers. I just don't, I'm not that polished speaker, but I connect with a room in a beautiful way. I can inspire a room. And that to me is the piece that I go, okay, of all things, that's what I want to do.
Okay, well, there's a one woman show here because I'm going to pitch it to you. But, yeah, like I would say something that I loved, and especially like looking at your stuff, your presentations and your performances in Soul Speaks, or when you're hosting your shows, and I mean, like it is so real. Like you are so real. You're so grounded. Mm-hmm. That to me is much more interesting than that kind of. I say this with the utmost respect to any speaker who gets up there. I always say, I look on the dating profiles, and I'm like, I see all these people doing like the mountain climbing, women doing mountain climbing and the hiking and the sports. And I'm like, that's awesome. It's not who I am. But I'm like, have you ever done stand up? Like that shit is
and that
scary.
would terrify me. That would totally terrify me.
To each their own. It's terrifying. It is terrifying stand up because it's just you and you're like, there's an expectation. Yeah. Like, what do you got? But So I say this with utmost respect to anyone who's ever performed, anyone who's ever presented. To me, I'm more attracted to the aesthetic of a gritty, real conversation.
Totally.
Versus, so there I was, and then the miracle happened. It's like, no, come on.
Yeah. And nothing against the Toastmasters, because I know a lot of people have done Toastmasters for years, and it's transformed them inside out and how they show up. And I honor that. I so honor that. It is not for me. When I did, I went to that, and I also went to Soul Speaks from the Stage. And so Paula and Lizanne's work. And when I went to Soul Speaks from the Stage, that totally transformed the way that I could get onto a stage and just be me and trust that I would find the words. I think that was one of the things, back in the day, I was like, well, what if I get up there and forget what I'm going to say? And I was terrified of that. I was like, what if I forget? And that was like the little factor. When I finally did the Soul Speaks, it was like, if I forget, I pause. Right. And there was this space of learning to trust myself, that I would find that everything that was supposed to flow through me would, and to be in that moment, to let it flow through me. And because at the end of the day, I actually think I'm a conduit. It's like what comes through me isn't all mine. It's like some of it, it comes from somewhere, and I'm really blessed with that. So if I am just allowing that, it's a much more beautiful thing for me. And that's why Paula and I decided to do the Soul Speaks from the Stage a couple of years ago, because I knew all my voice messaging work that I was doing. And then you combine the Soul Speaks work with it. And I tell you what, when we put that work together, last year was the first time we put that together. At the end of those 3 days, the people in my community grew. It's like when you think of the Grinch, when they talk about his heart growing 100 times, it was kind of like that. It was like their confidence, their presence, their way of showing up in their story all grew like 100 times. And it was incredible. It was so incredible.
And it makes so much sense that that's in alignment. Because like I have to say, just on my end, and I think we've talked about this, but the more I work with your people, like whatever it is that I'm directing them, if it's a video or a podcast, like it is nice, because so much of that work, the discovery work, and that, like you said, that growth work happens under you. So it's like, I'm always like, I'm always so grateful when it's a Cami Guildner person, because it's like, oh, they're going to have their stuff. Like they know, and they come in. Like Sherry Hess is one of my favorite examples.
She's a great example.
Right? And she'll say it. She's like, this is the work I did with Cami. This is the work I did with Cami. And then, so I have this, like they bring it, and then we just funnel it, we use it. So it makes so much sense that you would be in alignment with those people.
And, when I talk about the growth that, we were talking about this early on, the growth that my clients saw last year in their businesses, some of them went from zero to over $100,000 last year. And that was like, wow. And part of it was they were being so visible, and they were just getting out. So we got through all the hesitation of being visible very early in the year. And we're it's really interesting because we've been kind of playing in this year. We've got Soul Speaks from the Stage coming up the end of this month. And we talked about, should we push it out because of COVID? And I'm like, I don't want to push it out, because if we can do this safely in a way, which we've set it up so that we can, that, everybody is building their stories, and we're doing this good work early on in the year. The impact that it makes on this year for them it's too big to push this out to like June. It's like they're losing several months of this visibility in their voice and getting out and speaking into their story and their work if we wait. And so Paula and I were both like, let's make it happen in March. And I think we're going to be fine. I think we took a little bit bigger space than we did last year. And that's exciting to me to see what comes from that putting that out into the world.
That's huge. I love hearing that, because, like, again, you've seen the value, you've seen the shifts that have. It's
Yeah.
like, you don't. The same thing as with your speaking. Why deprive, or with anyone's business really? Why deprive yourself of your voice, your visibility, your vision?
Yeah.
Like, why deprive someone of that authentic gift that you give?
Yeah.
And
The other part of it is it lines really well with the program. So a lot of my people started in November, December, January, February. So that's kind of the timeline a lot of my mastermind has come through. So that early work is about the voice of who you are, being aligned to who you are, really getting clear about that brand of you. If the whole world could hear one message from you, what would it be? Right? Getting clear, finding that clarity around that. We just went through a whole thing on storytelling. It's going to lead right into this month. So I think it's that evolution. And I think that's why Paul and I were so excited, because when we put it together, we were like, oh my gosh, this created magic. And it's exciting what comes from it.
So you're exciting. You're magical. Like, here's my last question for you. Ready? It's like so on the nose. So my daughter last night, she she comes from a family of entrepreneurs. Like, obviously, I like my co-parent, my sister, my brother-in-law, and then my niece, who's 13. She started a baking business called A's Bakes, and it's really cute. It's awesome, and she's 13. And like I said, my brother-in-law's kind of a very, he's built himself from, like, he is a stereotype of a powerful entrepreneur. Like, he just tough childhood, picked himself up by the bootstraps, like all the things, and now he's very big time in my eyes. He runs a real estate company. It's huge. And then my sister's an optometrist. She had her own practice in Chicago for many years. Very successful practice, like all these things, right? But they're very, my sister's a feminist. My sister's an amazing person, but they still have that kind of masculine, like that, like drive. I always say, like, my brother-in-law's approach is just drive yourself through the glass door and then figure it out. Whereas myself, and Carrie, my co-parent, like, we have a different philosophy. So my daughter has been on this kick now since COVID started, where she wants to start her own, like, cafe.
That's awesome.
And she's 5, so it's time. She needs a job. It's time. And last night she was just she boiled it down. Her frustrations were that she's like, I'm just not selling. I don't have sales.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Like, she said it differently, but she's like, no one's buying. I'm like, well, babe, like, let's talk about your network. Let's, so we kind of mapped out like
oh my God.
We're like, okay, why don't you approach, Nylan Tara's mom? Why don't you ask this person? Why, you have all these friends from school, from like you have so many, like, this is a great time to start a business. Honestly.
She's got a good mentor in you.
Well, but I want to go to a better mentor. How would you, similar to her, where she's sitting there, she has an idea, and she's so personable, like, she's so wonderful, this kid. I was saying to my co-parent, I was like, there's something different about her, not just because she's my child, but like, she has this warmth. So anything she wants to do, it's going to be amazing. Yeah. But how would you, like, similar to someone who's just starting off their business, who is kind of just starting off, they maybe just got fired, or maybe they got into a new kindergarten class. Either way, like, what are kind of the first things that people should do to really figure out what they want, and then how to go about getting it?
Well, just what you said. I mean, first of all, you said that you started to describe her, right? She's special. What's special about her? She's warm, she's smart, she sees this idea. It's anytime you're stepping into your business, you're starting there. Who am I? Who am I at my very essence? And even as you build a marketing approach, it's like, how do I bring me into that marketing approach? Because if you're trying to fit yourself into, somebody else's marketing approach, I'm trying to be this or I'm trying to be that, you don't fit. And it's like, you've got to do you. And it's exactly what you told her to do. It's like, why don't you start with the people go be you, and start to build those relationships. And that's exactly where I would have sent her. So kudos.
Okay, good. That makes me feel good. I'm like, okay, I did something right,
I think you're doing a lot right with her, obviously. That just lights up my world, a 5-year-old thinking along those lines, because you just think about, if she's starting when she's 5,
yeah,
what a blessing for her. By the time she's 20, by the time she's 30, the experiences she will have under her belt, because she's had that kind of mentorship, is going to be just incredible.
Well, it's so funny. It's all based on, or a lot of it I think is based on what we see at home, right? So, like, I know, like, Rachel Lipchansky's daughters, they started a challah business. Like,
yeah, I've seen that.
Like, it makes so much sense, like I know so many different, I have a client out of Florida, her daughter, like, both her and her husband are entrepreneurs. Her daughter just started her own candle business. Like, it's so cool, versus, like, and my dad was an entrepreneur, but, like, he was always stressed out. Like, so I remember him just coming home just screaming all the time. And I busted his balls about this a few weeks ago, where I'm like, you got to come home and yell. Well, we have COVID. Like, I don't get to go home and do anything. My daughter's with me.
You're all there.
We're all there. And so for me, I fought entrepreneurship. And he did too. He's like, you don't want this life. He's like, get a job.
Interesting. And it's interesting because look at my son, who, he saw me working in the corporate world as he was growing up. And he was really clear he was not going to be doing the corporate thing. He's like, that is not my thing. And he started his own business several years ago out in Oregon, and he is rocking it right now. And it's so much fun to see that. But, he's really had to, I didn't shape him early on into being an entrepreneur. Yeah. I think he saw me step into the world of entrepreneurship and went, that's pretty cool. And, he still also had to find his own way of doing it. And, he's a very free-spirited, free soul, whatever you want to call that, right? I mean, that's free-spirited soul. He's definitely that. And his business in this last year, especially, is just growing like crazy. And I'm just so proud of him. And when he calls me up and asks me, Mom, help me with marketing, I'm like, oh, thank you.
I know, right? Like, when she calls me up for, like, when she wants to create her podcast next week,
yeah,
I'm gonna be
exactly.
Out,
That'll be awesome.
Right? You never know with her. She might be like, I need a podcast.
Exactly.
Well, but okay. So here's my real final question.
Okay.
In that case, then, do you feel like there's people that shouldn't be entrepreneurs?
Oh gosh.
And that's a hard question, because
it is a hard question. Perhaps. I mean, from the perspective of, it's being an entrepreneur is not it's messy. So if you like consistency and you like the steady paycheck, right? If you like going in and then clocking, I mean, it's not, and I'm pretty good about clocking out when it's time to clock out, but you carry a different level of responsibility as the CEO of your own company, and you're wearing all the hats, right? And so somebody who wants that simpler way of being, I think that's totally fine. In fact, I think entrepreneurs can't always survive without having people around them that like that level of support. And so I think it takes both sides, and knowing ourselves and knowing our levels of risk. All of those factors come into it. And knowing the levels of how much you want to stretch and grow. Because if you are just want to be comfortable, being an entrepreneur is not for you.
And there's obviously days where it's like, you go like, man, I would say like I would make out with a man. No disrespect to people that make out with men. Like I condone it. I recommend. I hope someone makes out with me at some point. But like, I don't know if I'll remember how to do it or if I'll be able to stop crying. But the point is that, like, I'm like, for just to be comfortable, right? Like, just to be comfortable would be nice. And my dad always said, not always said, after he saw that I was succeeding as an entrepreneur, only then did he say it. He goes, he's like, he's Israeli. So he's like, in the entrepreneurship or in corporate, you can always rely on the next 2 weeks you'll have a paycheck.
Yes.
And that's all you can rely on. Because you don't know if you'll have it after that. And I was like,
so
okay,
true.
that's forgiving. Like, that's
and
true.
and you work really. I mean, I look back how many hours I worked in the corporate world and how hard I worked, and I was doing it for someone else's bottom line. Today, I can work hard, or I can choose to take a day and like chill, and it all fits into my own bottom line, and I can create. I have the ability to create my possibilities in a much bigger way than I ever did in the corporate world. And that was something I even had to learn, because I think early on in my business, I would think, oh gosh, I earned a great salary in the corporate world, but I love what I do. Right. And I had to find that expansive space to say, hell with that. I earned a great salary in the corporate world and I can do better in my own world. Right. And so that's the vision that I had to really find my own voice around. I can create whatever I want to create as an entrepreneur.
One of the best things I heard recently. This was in October of last year of 2020. I was talking to Megan Conter, who's one of my best friends, and like,
and a dear friend of mine,
dear friend of yours, right? Like, runs the Dames. And I said to her, and I say this with the utmost respect. So I consider myself like a liberal politically, in the sense that I really respect where people are coming from, if they're coming from a good place, a loving place. And I have amazing clients that are on all sides, but especially on the other side, right? Like, on the other side of what I believe in. And I believe in them, and I care about them, and we have great conversations. So I was talking to Megan, we were talking about, okay, like, elections are coming up. And I said to her, I'm like, I gotta be honest, I'm like, I was looking, I have to say this is terrible or positive, or I don't know. I was looking at Donald Trump's tax plan. And I'm just saying, at the end of the day, and I'm liberal. I'm like super liberal. And I'm all these things. I'm progressive, all these things. But as a business owner, I mean, it's not the end of the world, and I say that to my conservative clients. I say it to my liberal clients. They all think it's funny, And I was like, well, yeah, like that's where I'm coming from. And so Megan said something really cool. That aside, she goes, look, as entrepreneurs, she's like, you need to remember that if it's a tax thing or not, it doesn't. She's like, it really boils down to the fact that you, as an entrepreneur, if it's a tax thing for you and it goes the other way, or it goes this way or that way, you can just make more money. Yeah. And I was like, I can always make more money. And that's not a mindset I used to have, but it's I see it now, where it's like, okay, to make more money, I recently, like I said, I recently niched and everything, and it's been amazing. And literally, you niche and it's like,
totally, right? And isn't that the funniest thing?
But it's grueling. It's like grueling and constricting until you do it, and then you do it, and it's like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I'll buy that.
Well, of course, and then you niche again, and it does it again.
I love that. Yeah. So, but I was like, you literally can make more money if you're in alignment, if you are in service of others while being authentic to yourself, and that's everything you teach.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
You're onto something, Cam.
Well, and I love that. I mean, I love that perspective around taxes. It's like, we can create whatever we want to create, and that's the beauty of being an entrepreneur. And it just takes you investing in yourself from a growth perspective, because nobody does this alone. And it means, seeing bigger, thinking bigger, planning bigger than, like, you don't want to just be little incremental steps. Go big with it.
Cami, you're the best. I love it. Okay, this was such a good conversation.
Oh, thank you, Ron. This is a great conversation.
Thank you. So how do people connect with you? There's so many ways, right? Like, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
The best place is join us in my Extraordinary Women Connect community. That's where we do. I mean, we're always have something going on there almost every day, and it's connecting great women to great women and some great men in the mix of it. So we're always inclusive that way. And it's really about people who want to make a difference in the world, who want to get up and be an influence on the people that they serve, and create ripple effects, because that's what this community is about. So that's really what it's about. So there, my podcast is Extraordinary Women Radio, and I'm about to hit 200 episodes. Just a little over a month now, I'll be hitting 200 episodes. So super excited about that. My website is camiguildner.com. And then I'm on all the social channels, although I don't play much on Instagram, but all the rest of them I'm pretty active on.
Yeah, I don't get Instagram, but it's a thing.
I'm on Instagram. I watch my son and my nieces. There you go.
There you go. No, I like to stalk ex-girlfriends, but I'm just kidding. Thank you, like Cami. This is like chock full. I'm so grateful to you. Like I got a lot out of this, and I want my daughter to watch this episode.
Oh, thank you. Well, it was so much fun, and I'm thrilled that you're doing this. And I think it's just your word is so important to be out in the world. And thank you for all that you do.
Oh, thanks, Cami. Virtual hug.
That's right.